Noah Basketball is our new presenting sponsor of our Coaching You podcast. Noah Basketball is a shot tracking and data company that has helped change how coaches and players perfect the game's most important skill, shooting. Noah is a data service provider that uses machine learning and the latest computer vision technology to provide real-time data and feedback to improve shooting accuracy and consistency for professional and amateur basketball players. Noah has now analyzed over 570 million shots from countless high school, hundreds of college teams, and 28 NBA franchises. The technology is simply amazing. Once the system has been installed, players will be able to get immediate feedback on their shooting arc, left and right positioning, depth, makes or misses, and makes the data available to players and coaches on your mobile device. For more information about how Noah can help your team, visit noahbasketball.com. Now, we use the term great coaches often, and we always say, man, that guy's a great coach, especially now we're seeing it in football as football season's winding down. Say, this guy's the great. And when we were going to go from the Pistons to the New Jersey Nets to coach, we were going to coach 2 months later the Dream Team. And we went to the press conference in New Jersey, and Chuck, he's at a press conference for a new coach, and literally the New York media is there, several hundred of them. And I can remember this question that was asked of him at his presser. Chuck, what makes you one of the greatest coaches of all time? And I'm saying, boy, it's a simple question, but man, that's a hell of a question. His answer to that was something I had never heard before, but I believe it to the point where I teach it. Here was his answer. I'm a pretty good coach when I've got great players. It's not about me, the coach, guys. Gals. It's about the players. So when we had great players, we were okay as coaches. Don't ever think that you're a great coach and you don't have good players. Just watch some of the press conferences we've seen in the last week where coaches knock their players for not being good enough, but they'll tell you how great of coaches they are. It's really important that you understand the reason that you get accolades or notoriety is because you won because of the players, not because you have some really tricky offense or some amazing defense. It's because those players that you got executed under pressure. When I'm a pretty good coach when I've got great players. Really important. For those of us that have ever lost a game, or if you even win a game, we believe very strongly, and Chuck did, in what we call the 12 o'clock rule. When you lose a game, feel sorry for yourself, be mad at your players, but at midnight, a new day starts and you have to move on. Your job is then to get your players ready to play the next game. So he uses it as a Irish descent person. He believed that the folks that have Irish heritage would like to drink a lot at night. And then after midnight, they couldn't remember a damn thing from the night before. So that was his thing. At midnight, I'm not remembering anything that happened. I'm moving on to the next day. I think it's important, especially for young coaches, to understand the 12 o'clock rule, because the things, don't let a loss turn into losing your next game. Don't let the game that you lost help you lose your next game, because you couldn't get over it. And now you're going to punish your players for losing that game, and you're going to keep dwelling on it to the point where you can't move on. The neat thing about the NBA, we played 82 games regular season. You always had to be ready for the next game. You might play a back-to-back game. You might have a day off and play a game. You might play 4 and 5 nights. But you had to quickly delete the game the night before. I took my notes. I watched my film for the next time we play that team. But you know what? And then when we had our meeting the next day, I would quickly review and correct some things that we needed to make our team better, but not dwelling on getting beat. I think it's so important. That's coaching is teaching. Let's remember that. The ultimate goal, coach / teacher. That's the biggest thing. All right. Another one is Dalyism is speak in headlines. We've talked about this. We've referenced this a lot. You know, Chuck was a big believer in communicating in sound bites. And he just believed that even though he was a terrific speaker, became a TV analyst post-coaching career, he felt that when you coach, you had to be efficient in the words you used. So all of a sudden, he would use those sound bites that I talked about before. Hey, no warm-up jumpers, get a stop. Get back. Little phrases that meant something to them, that if someone from the outside would listen, they would say, guy's very incoherent. Don't even know what he's talking. It was your own language to your team, but it meant something to them. You don't have time in a timeout for a speech, okay? You have to just get your players to change their behavior, encourage them, motivate them, give them a new play to run or defense to go into. So much has to happen in, 1, 2, or 3 minutes, sometimes even a 30-second timeout to change your behavior of your team. You have to be very efficient in the words you use. Okay. One of his things was to be non-confrontational. Now, there's a lot of coaches out there in football and stuff that were very confrontational. They'd love to get in your face. But to coach, you have to be your own personality. Don't try to be someone else. So his thing on being non-confrontational, he had a belief that if you were confrontational all the time with your players and said things to them that were kind of ugly, that would leave scars on your players. And he did not want to leave any scars on those players. So he was very, 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 I would say, he just wanted to make sure that he did not. Now, that was he demanding? Hell yeah. Hell yeah. He was very demanding. But would he correct the player? Yes. But he would do it in a way that he didn't feel hurt them, so that nowadays would be called verbal abuse almost by a coach. And in the old days, that was acceptable. Coaches could say anything they wanted. No problem. Nowadays, don't recommend it. Going hand in hand with that, we had a saying to our staff: shout praise and whisper criticism. So we would praise them in front of their peers all the time. We would tell a player, great box out, terrific shot, way to get a stop, excellent screen, out loud, praise them in front of the players to give them that peer recognition. But there were some players that couldn't handle being criticized, especially the stars many times, ironically. The star players struggled with being criticized in front of their peers. So I think you really have to understand that, when you do that. So a lot of times he would just stand up, that player would come over and they would act like he's giving him an instruction. But very simply, he might tell that player, listen, you're throwing the ball all over the place, or you're taking terrible shots. You got a minute to get yourself together, or I'm going to put this other guy in the game who happens to be one of the best players in the league. And when he goes in, you might not get back in. So, but he would not embarrass. No one knew the conversation. They had no idea what he was talking about. And I think it's really important that you understand not to embarrass players, but at the same time be demanding. Also, going hand in hand with that is you have to love your players. You must love your players because they know how you feel about them. They have a sense of that, the way you feel about them. And you just couldn't effectively coach, he believed, if you didn't love them. And I totally agree. To the point where there were a lot of people that even now, if I used Dennis Rodman, if I use his name, even though, we're removed 30, 35 years from Dennis playing for us, people all know who he is. And they say, oh man, what a nut, what a crazy guy. No, he was one of the highest IQ players I've ever coached, one of the most competitive people I ever coached, one of the most caring people. He didn't have a dad in his life. And so he was looking at us, his coaches, as surrogate parents. And so it's really important that you understand the needs of your guys and players, girls, and understand them and what they might need, because they might not only come from one parent family. You might be the role model that they're missing. And I think it's really important to the point where literally when Chuck and I left Detroit to go to New Jersey, Dennis refused to play. He refused to play for the Pistons anymore because he felt that he was abandoned and they wouldn't trade him to us, and he demanded a trade to go somewhere else. And he literally was traded to San Antonio. Guy that won the rebounding 7 straight years. Defensive player of the year 3 times at least. Demanded to be traded because there was no one there to love him. That's how powerful it can be. Next Dalyism, Chuck has a great belief that to be a good NBA coach, you need to be hard of hearing and have poor eyesight. You can't hear everything. I don't care if you're a high school, college, pro coach. You don't want to hear everything your players say about you, and you don't want to see everything they're doing. And so he just believed that sometimes it's better to not hear what they say and not see what they do. You know why? Because that can start a whole other thing up. And I thought that was really funny, because when he would say this, there are coaches I know that when a player would say something to him coming out of the game, like, why am I coming out? Why isn't so-and-so? And then they'd say, you sit your ass down there the rest of the game. Oh, that's really good. Now you take your best player out, and now you're not going to play him because you heard him because he's so competitive he wanted to play, and you're pissed off at that. So sometimes it's better not to react. And the phrases that he used to be hard of hearing and have poor eyesight, pretty funny to me. Another Dalyism is, to be successful, you must have likability. You must have likability. The people that are most successful in anything in life, people like them. They like them. They want to be around them. Players play for coaches and people that they like and they respect. So to be likable is so important. You want to be someone that is like that. Don't go out of your way to be an ass. Treat people well, be likable, respect people. To be a head coach, Chuck believed you had to have presence on the court. It had nothing to do with your stature, whether you're Cotton Fitzsimmons, Mike Fratello, Tom Izzo, Eric Musselman, fabulous coaches that aren't tall, doesn't matter. And just because you're tall doesn't mean you're going to be a great coach. But the presence is the confidence that you exude when you're out there, that the players believe in you. They have confidence in you. They react to what you're saying or teaching. That's presence. When you walk into a gym or into a room, everyone knows that you're there. Nick Saban has amazing presence. Not just his knowledge is off the charts, but he walks in, he doesn't say a word. That's presence, okay? One of the biggest problems I find with teams nowadays is your identity. I say to head coaches that I'm working with all the time, when I'm consulting with them, what's your team's identity? Well, we're going to do this, that. They want to they want to be great at everything. Well, that's good. Of course you do. But what is your team known for? What's your identity? Are you an offensive team, a defensive team, a fast breaking team, a physical team, known for your rebounding, whatever? You just, every time you walk on the court, your team touches people, as we say. You're so physical. But what do you stand for? What is your makeup? What are your non-negotiables as a coach? What are you committed to? I believe, that, you can't be good at everything. You can only emphasize a couple of things. Chuck believed we never had, even though we were a great offensive team, we had great offensive players. We ran fabulous stuff. We didn't emphasize that. All we really emphasized on offense was doing your job and being unselfish. Okay? When we say do your job, it might be being a great screener, might be a great cutter, might be delivering the ball to the open man. Do your job. But what we did emphasize every single day, every timeout, was defense and rebounding. That was our identity. And so we believe that you can only really emphasize two things. Pete Carrill, back in his days at Princeton, when I was very friendly with him, he would tell me I emphasize two things, passing and defense. Okay, that was him. It doesn't matter what you are, but you want your team to play way you emphasize. Okay. Next Dalyism. It's really, Chuck said this after a terrible loss we had. He said, it's really simple. I got out-coached. And now let me give you some background on it. We're playing the Miami Heat. We're in Orlando. Pat Riley was coaching Miami. We're playing at home. I'll never forget it to this day, even though it's 25 years ago, day before Thanksgiving. We get beat 85-60 at home. I got Penny Hardaway on our team. I got Nick Anderson. I got Horace Grant. I got some dudes. We got beat 85-60. And Chuck we're coming off. Chuck is the Olympic coach, Hall of Famer, highest paid coach in NBA history at that time. He walks into that little press conference and he says, it's really simple, people. I got out-coached. He didn't throw one player under the bus. He took it all on himself. Okay? Now, that just shows you, really the teaching point is don't throw your players under the bus when you lose. Take responsibility. You're accountable. They're your players. If you didn't get them ready, if you weren't prepared, it doesn't matter. Or if they were prepared and you had them ready, just didn't make a shot, it's you. You're the coach. Because nothing, when you throw your players under, what you do is you lose trust of your players. And I think that was the biggest thing. But, asterisk, I do not recommend this, that every coach should do this. I do not recommend this. If you're a young coach, don't tell people you got out-coached. Don't tell. This is a Hall of Fame coach. This is one of the best coaches. He was established. He didn't worry about getting fired and stuff like that. If you're a college coach, you got 5 years left on your contract, that's fine. But I just want, the point of the thing was getting out-coached was about accountable. You as the head coach, you're the accountable one. Don't blame the players. One of the sayings that we have for Chuck is the players called him Daddy Rich. And it wasn't the amount of money he made. It was the way he dressed, the way he carried himself. They thought he was the sharpest dresser going. And John Sally gave him that name, his nickname, because of all the great clothes he had and how, even though he was in his 60s, he dressed better than any player on the team. And he loved shopping. Hey, he liked to play golf and stuff like that, but his number one hobby was shopping. He loved it. And I think it had to do with being growing up in the Depression for Chuck. He was very poor growing up. His first coaching job, for those of you that are getting in coaching and are pissed off about your salary, he taught 7 subjects at a junior high in Maryland and was paid $3,200. Okay. And by the time he was the head coach of the Pistons, but even way before that, even as a college coach at Penn, he was the sharpest dresser in coaching. Had a million suits, ton of shoes. He loved that stuff. And so but Daddy Rich was his nickname, and it was one that the players gave him. He didn't name himself that. Okay, back to basketball. I'm going to talk now to assistant coaches. Assistant coaches, you think you work very hard, and you do, but watch the head coach after a game. Most head coaches after a game, and I don't care if you're coaching in Michigan, North Dakota, Florida, I don't care where it is, the weather, the temperature, that head coach is, after a game, his shirt is drenched. He has sweat, and he has gone through everything on his shirt. And I learned this from Chuck. One night we were playing the Lakers in the Forum, back in the old days in the Forum. Kareem, Worthy, Magic, Byron Scott, unbelievable team. Pat Riley's coaching. And we go in there and just kick their ass. I mean, just crush them, like 18 points. And we go into this dressing room. It's like the size of the office we're recording this in right now. And we go into the coach's locker room. And Chuck takes off his sport jacket, his suit jacket, and his shirt is drenched, like someone took a bottle, a Gatorade thing, and threw it on. I take off my jacket. He reaches his hand under my armpits, and he touches it. It's not an ounce of sweat under there. I'm dry as can be. That's the difference between a head coach and an assistant coach. Assistant coaches don't sweat. The person with the expectation level, they're the ones that are sweating. Okay? So I think it's really, really important to understand the pressure that's on that seat, that man or woman. They are the ones that are feeling it. And so I think it's really, really important. Fast forward, a few months later, we're coaching the old Salt Palace in Salt Lake City, Utah. And my cohort, the late great Brendan Malone, Mike Malone's daddy, there's only two assistants. He's out, we're on a West Coast trip. He's out advanced scouting, okay, because we didn't have any scouts back then. He's out advanced scouting, seeing two of the other teams who are going to play on the trip. So Chuck and I are at the game. In the second quarter, old Karl Malone, John Stockton, and the great Jerry Sloan are kicking our ass. They're killing us. And the arena is like 12,000 seats. And we're down 18 points in the second quarter. And all of a sudden, Karl Malone and Mahorn and Lambier, they get into it. And now it's almost like a fight. And now they're going to, call a technical foul on one of our guys. Now they're ready to turn really bad into horrific by ejecting one or two of our players for fighting. And here goes my man, Chuck Daly. He walks right out into the middle of the court. The referee, he's not yelling at the refs. He just walks right to the middle of the court. And the referee says, "What the hell are you doing?" And he keeps walking, and they hit him 2 T's and eject him. This is happening in like 5 seconds. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting there going, oh my God, I'm here by myself. I don't have any assistant. We're down 18 points, and we're getting our ass kicked. Oh boy, this is great. And I've only been with the team 3 months. Well, we end up rallying and beating them in overtime. And we go into the little locker room in the Salt Palace afterwards, and Chuck is laughing so hard. He tells me to take my jacket off. It looked like I dove into the Marriott's pool at the hotel across the street. I am drenched. And he laughed at me, and he said, "You sweat tonight, huh? Good for you. I'm proud of you." He said, "Let's go have dinner. Let's go have dinner down the block at this great restaurant we loved." And I said, "Chuck, I'm dehydrated. I can't move. I'm going to try to walk literally 100 yards across the street to the hotel." That's how exhausting it was being a head coach for one game. Okay. So I think it's really, really important that you understand that position and savor and cherish the role that you have and also that of the head coach. Coaches, are you looking to take your game preparation to the next level? Then FastModel Sports is the perfect coaching software for you. With FastDraw, build an organized library of plays and drills and create professional playbooks to share with your players and staff. You can also download over 9,500 free plays and drills from our Playbank directly to your FastDraw account. Looking for a better way to build your scouting reports and want to include video? With FastScout, build custom scouting report templates to prepare your team best for each individual opponent. Plus, did you know with the latest updates from FastModel Sports, you can now include video with your FastScout reports and share with your coaches and staff all within the FastScout mobile app. The combination of FastDraw and FastScout is by far the best way for you and your coaches to create winning game strategies and effectively communicate them to your team. Over 10,000 high school and youth coaches trust FastModel sports products to help their teams reach their goals. To order, go to fastmodelsports.com. Use code COACHINGU15 to get 15% off any FastDraw or FastScout products. Remember, go to fastmodelsports.com. Use code COACHINGU15 to get 15% off any FastDraw and FastScout products. When I came and joined the Pistons, it was January of '89, and the other assistant coach at the time became the head coach of the Indiana Pacers, the great Dick Versace. And when I came and joined Chuck, literally from the first day, he said, I want you to do most of the coaching. I've been here 5 years. They've been to the finals the year before, Eastern Conference Finals twice. He's probably coached almost 560 games in 5 years. He said, they need a new voice. They're tired of my voice. So if you ever walked in to our practice in my 4 years with the Pistons, and you had no idea you were from another planet or another country, you would think I was Chuck Daly because I was coaching everything, every drill, everything, putting in all the things. And every now and then you would hear a voice go, let's do it this way. Isaiah, do this. Because he wanted a new voice, but he wanted to now make, when he spoke, his voice became way more effective. Absolutely brilliant, selfless on his part. But sometimes, so his saying to me was, when he basically recruited me, was, they're tired of hearing me. They need a new voice. So that will happen on a coaching staff. That's why you really have to have some good assistant coaches, because you need to give them a role to teach. Now, we go from there to New Jersey, 2 years, same thing. I do all the coaching. He coaches the games. He's making key points in every shoot around. Anytime after I teach an offense or defensive thing, he adds his 2 cents, which are really like $100 bills. They're that profound. And now we go to Orlando. We take over the Magic. He's 67 years old, the highest paid basketball coach in NBA history, college basketball history. All of a sudden, we go in there. We go to the first practice. I'm ready to go do my thing. All of a sudden, without even talking to me, he starts coaching. And for 2 years, he did all of the coaching. All the coaching. Because I think at that point, he wanted to show people that he could still do it. He was still the most special coach. But yet, we were so closely in tune with each other, he didn't even have to tell me. I recognized immediately what was happening. And I loved it because I was comfortable in my role. Because my role as an assistant is to assist and help the head coach. But that's how it can go at different places. There's different college programs where assistant coaches do most of the coaching. Yet there's a phenomenal head coach there because that person might be a great detailed teacher. And so, you want to operate your team under the strengths of your program. So I think it's really, really important that you understand that. And I think that's something that's important. One of the things that when you get a job, most of us, when you get your first job, it's going to be a bad job many times. Very few people are going to get JJ Redick getting the Lakers job a great job. You know what I mean? Your first job can be a bad high school job. UB Brown, my high school coach, first job he ever took, he took over a team that lost 39 straight games, and turned it around. And one of the toughest leagues in New Jersey, turned it around to being an incredible team, a state contender, in a tough league, but flipped the whole script in 3 years. And so that can happen. But the Daly-ism that Chuck would always say to us was the job, work the job. It's the best one you got. Never forget, don't bitch about your job. Don't complain about the job you have. It's the best one that you got. So work the hell out of it. And that's so good because I remember when we went to New Jersey, we had great ownership with the Pistons. The ownership in New Jersey was a little sketchy. 7 of them, as opposed to one man in Detroit. 7 people to make a decision, very hard. They weren't used to spending money. And here comes Chuck. And Paul Silas, the late, great Paul Silas, Rick Carlisle, the great coach of the Pacers, myself are the assistant coaches. Imagine that. Not a bad coaching staff. And the 3 of us, Paul, Rick, and myself, at one of our staff meetings, we are bitching about how bad the ownership is doing us. And Chuck immediately silenced us and said, "Hey guys, I know you're all really good, but the last time I looked, it's the best job each one of us has. Work the job. Work the job." So I just want to remind you of that. Sometimes, bitching and moaning seems to be a trait of coaching. Fine. But you know what? The job that you have, it's the best one you have. If you don't like it, quit it. Okay. Next Dalyism. You must have patience. Don't be in a hurry. This refers to career moves. I think a lot of young coaches, especially, even some of our older ones now, they try to skip steps. They want to move. There's a college coach I know that's phenomenal, incredibly highly paid. Every year he wants a new job. Every year he wants a new damn job. Like he has a long-term contract, but he wants a new job every year. Settle into the job you have. People gave you a long-term contract. Settle in. Work that job. Don't be in a hurry because you think it's going to be better somewhere else. And the great Chuck Daly's wife, Terry, had a great saying, new job, same problems. One of my favorites. New job, same problems. A great Dalyism, because that is so true. I don't care what job it is. It's a new one, but you know what? The same problems are there. It happens. It seems to follow us. But you know what? Don't be in a hurry to keep moving. Don't skip steps. Take your time and work your job. He would always get asked, what's the key to success? And, I think it's Marcus Freeman from Notre Dame, Nick Saban. These guys, they're getting so much opportunity to share their wisdom. And I think it's about working. It's about working all the time. Dedication and hard work, that's your ticket to success. That's what Chuck would always say. Be dedicated and work hard at your craft, and that's going to be the ticket to your success. It's not going to be something else. So being a hard worker, someone that's willing to spend the time, someone that masters their craft, that's so darn important. And that's about learning. And next Dalyism is to understand your players. You have to understand your players. A lot of people that are running head coaches of teams, they do what's good for them, but you have to understand the needs of them. If they're Are they high school students, are they college students, or are they professional players? We all have needs, you know, and so it's really important that you understand what they are, and I think that's it. Some players are great practice players, some aren't. Some guys play, in the pros, they'll play 44 minutes in a game. Now we have practice the next day. You want them to practice? They just played 44 minutes. I learned a lesson when we were with the Pistons. There was never a problem. Our practices are short and sweet. We had great players. They came and they practiced. They put their work in. All of a sudden, I go to the Nets. One of my favorite guys I have ever coached is Derek Coleman. He was 21 years old at the time. We had a 19-year-old Kenny Anderson, a 21-year-old Derek Coleman. And Derek was an immense talent. And one night he had, against Karl Malone, Charles Barkley, a back-to-back night, who had 38 points against one guy. He had 19 rebounds against the other. We go to practice, and he's sitting in the stands in a warm-up suit. And I'll never forget, Chuck says to Paul Silas, go find out what's wrong with him. And he goes over, and he says, DC, what's up? And he says, hey, he says, I'm tired, man. I'm really tired. And he said, well, just come on out in the court and practice. Chuck will take care of you. So he came out, and Chuck said, what's wrong? He said, Coach, I'm exhausted. It's really hard work, the guys I got to play against. Tomorrow night, I got Charles Oakley from the Knicks. Chuck says, well, warm up, and then I'll sit you out. But the greatest line I've ever heard is Coleman's DC said to Paul Silas, ask Chuck if he wants it today in practice or tomorrow in the game. And you know what? Chuck wanted it tomorrow in the game. Okay, so we let him warm up, put his ass back in the stands, and let everyone else practice, because Chuck understood this guy had done it in the games. Now he needed to rest. So I just love that, understanding your players, and that's stuff they don't teach you anywhere. There's no school to learn that. I mean, so you have to be wired to be in tune to that. Another Dalyism is don't worry about making mistakes. I've been coaching for 35 years. I've made every mistake you can make. Let's just have fun. That has to do with when Chuck was trying to hire me. I had gone from coaching in the Atlanta Hawks with Mike Fratello to being assistant GM, going to become GM. And all of a sudden he calls me New Year's Day and wants to hire me. The Hawks give me permission to talk. So we go to dinner. And at dinner, I said to him, listen, you lost in the Game 7 of the finals by 2 points to the Lakers last year. I hate the Pistons. The Pistons hate the Hawks. I might screw up your team. And he looks at me and says, don't worry about making any mistakes. I've been coaching for 35 years. I've made every mistake you can make. Let's just have fun. And all of a sudden, I didn't worry about screwing up their team. Here's a guy that turns out to be one of the greatest coaches of all time, turns out to be a Hall of Famer, turns out to be the coach of the Dream Team. And he's telling me he's made every mistake you can make in coaching. What a humbling thought. But the biggest one, he said, let's just go have some fun coaching. And you know what? It flipped everything in my life, changed my life as a coach. Because it was like all of a sudden I used to say, UB gave me my bachelor's and master's degree, and Chuck gave me my PhD, because the wisdom that he shared with me was absolutely incredible. So I think it's so important about understanding about when you take a job, don't worry about screwing things up. Don't worry about making mistakes. Just let's go have some fun and do our best. I talked before, Chuck had this saying that when you're coaching, it's all based on the players listening to you. But every time in coaching, when you see at the college, mainly in a pro level, in any sport, a coach gets fired, sometimes it's about the record, but more often it's the record is a reflection on the point where the players, basically you hear the term, tuned you out. So he had this saying, players, they allow you to coach them, but when they stop listening, it's time to go. So when we were in Detroit, even though we had back-to-back championships, he was there for 9 years. And we always say our philosophy is coaching is like dog years. It's like 7 years for every year you coach. So like he was there, it seemed like for 60 years. And now all of a sudden, after year 4 and 9 years with some players like Isaiah and Lambier, at some point, things become stale. They stop listening. And then he said, even though we had time on our contract, he said, it's time to go. It's time to go. Even though we love it here, it's been great for us. If you want to keep coaching, it's time to go. And you know what? It was. But it's a really important thing that you understand that. When the players stop listening, it's time to go. One of the things I've had some players on certain teams. I'm working with college teams, pro teams, different sports. And I see this player that's pouting, bad body language. Yet the player never plays. Never plays. The coach says, I can't reach this guy. He's pissed off. He's never plays. And I share with them the story that we had a player with the Pistons that never played. His name was William Bedford. He was 4th pick in the draft, had some off-the-court issues, but we had a great, great team. We were too deep at every position. We had 12-man roster. He was 12. And when we got, one day he's pouting. So, now the players are getting pissed off, but they were great. They policed themselves and they would call him out. But he comes and said, William, what's your problem? You're not playing me. You're not doing this. You're not doing that. He says, you earn minutes here. I don't give them. That was a really great lesson that he said. But he said, William, you have to learn. Because you're pouting, I'm not going to play you. If Isaiah wants to pout, if Dumars wants to pout, if Rodman wants to pout, they can. You're not good enough to pout. I thought it was one of the really great lines I'd ever heard, because certain players, they're just not good enough to pout. They're just should be damn happy they're on the team. And so literally I've had to teach some college coaches, men and women, to say this to the player. Even though they're on scholarship, they might even have an NIL deal. They're not performing and they're pouting. If they're not good enough to get in the game, they're not good enough to pout. And trust me, very few coaches are going to get intimidated, nor should you, to play a player that's pouting. Okay, let's finish up with a couple of really neat things that I wanted to share with you. Okay, one of the really neat things that Chuck's people talk about negotiating and contracts and things like that. We had to handle player contracts. Okay, not that we were doing them in our role as coaches, but your players were going through contracts. Some players would sit out if they didn't have a new contract. Later, I became a general manager where I was actually negotiating contracts. And one of Chuck's favorite lines to me was, it's not what you deserve, it's what you negotiate. It is such a powerful, powerful statement. It doesn't matter what you think you deserve, it's what you negotiate. And he later told me that no matter how long he had been coaching, never once has he ever been paid the value of his worth. I can tell you this, having coached nearly 50 years, I've never once been paid the amount that I'm due. I've always been underpaid. And trust me, 100% of our listeners today, you're all underpaid. Now, I'm not feeling sorry for you. I don't care how much you make. You're underpaid because that's how good you are. Okay? But guess what? So you're not going to get paid what you deserve, but it's what we negotiate. So when we accept the terms of the deal, we said yes, then stop bitching and moaning and let's go. Let's work. Let's coach. Okay. Now, listen, I hope this was really, really, really helpful for you because obviously you can tell I just love Chuck. Chuck was one of the great influences in coaching, in our game, to the point where the NBA Coaches Association has named a Chuck Daly Achievement Award every year that we give out during the finals to someone who's really contributed to the game. It's an amazing award that is really the most valued award that any coach in the NBA can ever get. And we give it to head coaches, assistant coaches, anyone that's made that achievement that Chuck did, because he loved the game and he loved the key thing is he loved players, and that was it. But I wanted to talk to you as we finish up about how can I keep growing. So here's what I do. I study great coaches in all sports. That's really important to me. I study the very best. To me, my greatest learning happens from studying football coaches, because I always thought football coaches were ahead of us. So I study Saban. I'm a Saban disciple. I know everything about Nick, everything about him. And now that he's in the media space, he is sharing wisdom everywhere. Belichick, same thing. His pressers were legendary. On to Cincinnati, never give you a squat. Now, all of a sudden this year when he got into media, and I think you'll see it continue at North Carolina because he's going to be recruiting, he's going to be sharing his coaching nuggets everywhere. I learned from that. But the great Bill Walsh, who was the coach of the 49ers, who I got a chance to meet when I was coaching the Pistons, just a genius, literally a genius. People like them, you can learn from the books that have been written about him, and he also wrote on coaching. The great Michael Lombardi, who's the GM to Belichick at North Carolina, one of the great leadership coaches of all time. I read everything and listen to everything Michael Lombardi says about coaching and leadership. John Gordon is one of the true people that has high-level relationship for years now, 15, 16 years with coaches in all sports. He's great at storytelling. I love that. I read books on leaders. I'm reading Elon Musk right now. I've read Steve Jobs. I want to constantly learn what people that have greatness do. I listen to podcasts on all the different subjects that have to do with leadership and coaching. And I also, our Coaching U Plus app, one of the things that when Zach and I, started this a couple of years ago, what we wanted to do is get a space for coaches in all sports, but especially men's and women's basketball, where you could go and learn anytime you needed it. On demand, you could call it up and you could listen to clinics by some of the best coaches. We're nearing 500 clinics in our app, podcasts with different coaches, courses that we have, all kinds of things. Zach has broken it down into categories, and the value is insane. But, I had one of our clients call yesterday and said, I'm having a lot of trouble with our culture. I said, well, go right away. I mean, it's like instantaneous. I said, go to Kelvin Sampson, Billy Donovan, Doc Rivers, Billy, and Eric Spoelstra. Huh? Yeah. These guys, they share all the time. That's what I love about it. So Coaching U Plus app is amazing. But most importantly, we thank you for listening to our podcast. We hope they're helpful. You're right in the middle of your season right now. And so it's so important that you get a chance right now to don't wait, say, next year I'll be better. No, you got to be better tomorrow. You got to, every day you got to walk in. Head coaches, assistant coaches, flash, you can never have a bad day. You can't have a bad day in practice. You can't have a bad day in the game. Well, shit, that's a lot of pressure. Yeah, it is. That's what our job pays. That's the expectation level. You're a savant. You're an expert in your field. There's very few people that have the expertise that you have. So constantly grow and get better. Someone said to me the other day, you know so many offenses now and you're not even coaching a team. Yeah, because while you're coaching your sorry-ass team, I'm working every day at learning. I'm studying everyone else that you're playing against. I'm learning. I know every offense that's out there because I have to be able to teach it. Be exhaustive in your research and your study. And pick out the things that fit into your playbook. Figure out what you want to be, what your team fits, and then become it. It's an honor, as always, to share with you. And until next week, this is the coach, Brendan Suhr.